Hello, everyone. Joshua Short with you. We've got Lauren Moss here as well for yet another edition of Something Extra. Lauren, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing great. I couldn't be better. I am really excited how far we've come. We just recorded, I don't know if you realize this, our longest podcast.
It was a long one.
And people are talking about it, too. I got a few texts about it with Andrew Berlin. He was the best, absolute best owner of the South Bend Cubs.
Yeah.
That was really, really fun. We had that conversation. If you haven't seen it, it's anywhere you can get your podcast and on WNDU.com.
And it was easy to talk to him. It didn't feel like it was that long. But it ended up being about 45 minutes?
About 45 minutes.
Wow.
And I was inspired. Were you not? I feel like
he has a great life story and a great connection to South Bend, which is why he does so much in our area, gives back and wanted to own the South Bend Cubs and rebuild that area, rebuild the stadium. So it was really fascinating to hear all about that.
I can tell you, I went to the game. It was a good time. It was the cold.
They won, right?
They won, and it was a comeback. Really, it was. It was about I think the seventh inning where things were frenetic. I'll put it that way. And it was cold out there too.
It was cold last night. I was thinking about you because I took my dog for a walk, and I'm like, oh man,
Luna doesn't like this.
It's pretty chilly. No, it's pretty chilly out there for a baseball game. But when baseball's on.
People are happy. People are happy.
It doesn't matter the temp outside.
There was an energy in the atmosphere there at the stadium. It was so cold. Obviously, it was a sellout, but not everyone came because of the temperatures. But people were excited, those who were there. So it was a good time.
Good.
I want to transition if we can because we have a really good guest on the show today. And I think it's going to be something a lot of people are going to be talking about for a long time to come, especially here in South Bend. I don't think people know about everything that happens life after football, right? I think when you got the stars on the Notre Dame football team and then they leave and go to the NFL and then things kind of get lost. They're in the NFL now, and unless you have a relationship with, South Bend or come back often, you don't really have that relationship with these players anymore. And so we have a pretty compelling interview, I would say, Lauren Moss, that I'm really excited about. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people have heard about.
No, it's really a tragic story. Someone who was loved here at Notre Dame, went on to play a couple years in the NFL. And a lot of people know his name, but people don't exactly remember what happened, I would say. So that's why it's so important that we have this podcast right now. We're shining a light on what's to come. It's a documentary, Josh.
Yeah, it is a documentary. It is actually done by two filmmakers. One of them is John Kouris, who we're going to be bringing on here shortly. We have an opportunity to speak with him. Cecily Birch as well. They are going to show a screening of the first half of this documentary surrounding a former linebacker for Notre Dame who he was really popular here. His name, it may ring a bell, Demetrius DuBose. Yeah. And a lot of people call him Demo. And he was a figure in South Bend during his time here in the mid to late 90s.
Right. He really was. I mean, he was a giant on the field, and I think a big teddy bear is like how people would describe him, especially John, who we're about to introduce, because they had a very close connection.
Well, let's introduce him, and we're going to talk about this documentary as well. It's an inaugural documentary. It's going to be played this weekend. It's going to be played April 12th on campus at the DeBartolo Performing Arts Center, DPAC as they call it on campus. Let's bring in John into the conversation. John Kouris, everybody, is now a part of Something Extra. It is so good to see you, friend. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've got the fake applause. Don't you love that? Yeah. The authenticity when we got the...
We're trying to give you a warm
welcome. It always
welcome.
Feels good, real or fake.
It's good to see you, sir. It is good to be with you here on the podcast. We usually have some good times. We talk about some good things on this podcast. We laugh. We talk about real topics as well. And this is one of those topics. This is one of those conversations that I think is, especially for you, is very emotional. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Yeah. Let's first take a step back. You are a product of Notre Dame, correct? So talk to us about your history with the university.
Yes, sir. Well, I grew up in Northwest Indiana, Hammond and Munster, Indiana. Catholic kid. My dad was a high school football player. He's a great football player. He's actually in the Hammond Sports Hall of Fame. He was a Big Ten football official for 25 years. And he grew up wanting to play football for Notre Dame. So I grew up wanting to play football for Notre Dame. He ended up playing at Western Michigan. And to make a long story short, he and my grandfather, who was a Hammond chief of detectives, they both trained me to play football, and they worked me out really hard. And I was recruited growing up in high school, and Notre Dame was recruiting me, and I ended up not getting a scholarship to Notre Dame, but I got in.
Come
the
on.
school academically.
Yeah, that deserves an applause. That's great.
Hey, thank you. So they had recruited me, and they asked me to come in as a preferred walk-on. Now it's like a term they actually have, like a PWO, a preferred walk-on. At the time, like, I didn't really want anyone knowing I was a walk-on. I wanted to be a stud like Demetrius and like all these other guys, but I wasn't. I was who I was, and you know what, Demetrius and a lot of those other guys treated me like I was a starter, like I was an All-American, and I really learned what Notre Dame was about from those guys that were there, the older guys, and the guys that showed us the way and how to be. So that, for me, growing up idolizing Notre Dame and the football program, I snuck on the field when I was like in 8th grade, and I tore up a section of the field where Pat Terrell broke up a pass in the 1988 game against Miami.
Wow.
So
Your claim to fame.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Magic happens at Notre Dame Stadium. I feel like when you're a Notre Dame fan, it's truly in your blood. So I love that you share that story. We see where you're live from right now. There's a picture above your shoulder. That's Demetrius. So talk about your relationship.
Yeah, Demo was one of our 4 captains, along with Rick Meyer, Devon McDonald, and Irv Smith. And he and I, during two-a-days in 1992, which was his senior year, he was a returning All-American inside linebacker. Broadcasters referred to him as our best player on defense. He certainly was one of our best players, and he was our leader, our most vocal leader. So we went head-to-head. I was a tight end playing on scout team, and he was a starting linebacker. So we really went at each other, and he looked out for me on the field. He gave me guidance, little pointers. And then off the field, he was always a friend, somebody who would tell me to keep my chin up when things weren't going well. There's a story about how I wanted to quit the team at one point, and it was at the same juncture where he was having to sit out the first 2 games of the year due to an NCAA suspension, which was absolutely crazy at the time.
What did he get suspended for? I'm just curious. What happened with that?
Yeah, so he had a co-signer for an auto loan. He grew up with a single mother. He grew up hand to mouth, fought all his way through, and in college, there are plenty of guys, and in the film this will be discussed, who really had a hard time just like making ends meet, like affording meals at the time. And these were stars. These were guys that everyone knew. These were guys who were on posters, at the bookstore. Yet
there was no NIL back then, right?
No.
There was no NIL that existed.
No NIL, and he was going to be at the time a 1st round draft pick. He ended up being a very high pick in the 2nd round, the 4th pick in the 2nd round. He played 4 years in the NFL, but at the time he couldn't afford. He had no credit. He wasn't asking for help paying for the car. He just needed a co-signer. His godfather, a guy from Seattle who he knew in high school, he converted to Catholicism because of this guy and because of O'Day and because of what he felt at Notre Dame. But when his godfather, a Notre Dame alum, co-signed on a car note, the NCAA somehow got wind of this and came down hard on Demo and on Notre Dame. Wow. I feel like we've always had a big target on our backs. And, I guess it goes with the territory, but it was really unfair.
So wait, let me get this straight, because this is part of the story, right? And we're going to dive into exactly what happened to him here momentarily, because I don't think people realize your friend is no longer with us, and that's the point of this documentary and this podcast. So we're going to get to that. But I got to stop you, because it sounds like you're saying there was an auto loan situation. Why did that have anything to do with the NCAA? What was that all about?
Well, you'd have to ask them. You know what I mean? Hey, first of all, what an incredible experience to have been an NCAA athlete. I know it's difficult, but they were really draconian at that time. And I feel like finally there's a pulse. At least they're taking a pulse of what it means to be a college athlete. And I know for us, not necessarily for me, but for our teammates, a lot of them came from basically nothing and did everything they could. And for Demetrius, it involved academics. This dude was a scholar. I mean, he grew up in a Jesuit high school. he came to Notre Dame. He graduated in 3.5 years, a degree in finance and international business. He was dynamic. He could have been the mayor of Notre Dame. I mean, he was carried off the field his last game by thousands of fans. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. The pictures you'll see in the film, he's with all sorts of people, all different races, not just the football players, but he was friends with the students. Demetrius looked out for his roommates who were regular students. He looked after the janitors at Grace Hall. He's the guy that was always, friends with the equipment manager, the trainers, the managers, and the football players. So, yeah, wow. I mean, and I do want to say, honestly, that suspension, those first 2 games, that was maybe the difference between him being a first-round draft pick and a second-round pick. True. And if he was a first-round pick, I guarantee he probably would have started. Instead, he ends up on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and for 4 years, he was a stud on special teams.
Wow.
But he was stuck behind Hardy Nickerson, who was borderline Hall of Famer. And so
it was hard for him to get his chance.
Team. Exactly. And this whole story may have been a different outcome because, look, we can focus on, and we'll talk, whenever we talk about it, we'll focus on what happened on that fateful day. But Demo died many little tiny deaths that, you're not aware of at the time that lead ultimately to this fate, which really was definitely avoidable.
Yeah.
This did not have to happen. And, part of the reason for doing this is to try to prevent this from ever happening again, to show that, what it means to be a Notre Dame person means you're loyal forever. A loyal son means it's forever. So
go ahead, Lauren.
I mean, you've turned this into your life, your passion. Talk about that day, sharing exactly his story. What happened?
So on July 24th, 1999, Demetrius was living in Mission Beach in San Diego with a guy named Randy West. Randy West had a volleyball league. It was kind of a fledgling volleyball league. And when Demo and him connected, Demo was looking for a place to live in San Diego. He was connected to Randy. And he gave him basically some of his last money. He gave him $12,000 to help his volleyball league. In exchange, he got to live with Randy. And they became friends, too, and they were roommates. So they had a volleyball tournament that morning. They didn't fare too well. Demo was a competitive volleyball player, and he was on his way to being a pro beach volleyball player.
You mean, hold on, I'm going to stop you because you go from a football stud to a competitive volleyball player is not in my bingo.
An athlete.
Yeah.
You can't put Demetrius DuBose in a box. You try to describe what kind of guy he was, and it's he's a Renaissance man. He was beyond description, and he was.
I tell you what, I played volleyball. That's a different sport compared to tackling people and going at people head on. You got to move your body.
That's right. And that was a big adjustment for him. He had to lose weight. He had, he was already into really dynamic stretching, which he was 20 years ahead of his time with this stuff. And so, pro volleyball players comment, Olympic volleyball players comment, hey, Demo had what it took mentally, because physically, yes, he was as gifted as anyone. Was an Olympic type athlete. I mean, at the time he was coming out of high school, he could have gone anywhere to play basketball in college. He was one of the best players in the state of Washington.
Wow.
He was the best football player in the state of Washington. And at the time, the most highly recruited athlete to ever come out of Seattle. That's Demetrius DuBose. And he chose Notre Dame, even though his family grew up, they're from Selma, Alabama. The DuBose family is a story of the Great Migration of the 20th century.
Which I, too, am a product of. So to hear that is pretty symbolic.
It is. And that's why this story is circular. We're talking about his last day, and I'm thinking about his mom marching on the Pettus Bridge with his aunts in 1965, and them escaping Selma, Alabama. Literally crosses were being burned on the yards next door. The DuBose mother, the matriarch, started sending her children one by one. One was in New York, one was in Chicago, but Jackie, Demetrius's mom, ended up in Seattle and ended up working jobs that were really hard. And it was just her and Demetrius.
So it sounds like he had this relationship with his mom and obviously moved north, or in this case, northeast with his mom. Obviously, Notre Dame became I mean, people loved him here. The videos, which we're going to show our viewers who are actually watching this podcast, the trailer says everything about that. And then you talk about what happened after football. I want to get back to that because I have some more questions because I know me and you talked before we actually did this podcast. He's living with his friend now, obviously, who's helping him with his volleyball camp. And take us through that day. Continue back to that day of what took place there.
Sure. So they, early in the morning, hot summer day in Southern California, they played volleyball for 4 hours. After the volleyball matches, typically they had like a keg of beer on the beach. Demo and Randy had 1 or 2 beers each, and then they left. They went back to their apartment in Mission Beach, and Randy went to do some work, some paperwork for the volleyball league. And Demo went to watch the sunset. And Randy and Demo would typically watch the sunset on their neighbor's balcony, which was directly one building west, closer to the ocean. So they had a clear view of the sunset on their neighbor Charles Flynn's balcony. This day was no different than any other. Demo stepped over onto the neighbor's balcony. He can literally take his leg and step over onto the property, watch the sunset. What was different this day is Demo then saw a bed right there. He was exhausted, opened the sliding door and went and fell asleep in that bed. Now I want to give also a little context. This is Mission Beach. It's a beach community. There's intermingling a lot. There's no stranger there. In fact, when filming, I knocked on the residence, Charles Flynn residence, and there were the college kids living there. Now they invited me in. They had never met me, and they allowed me to film in there.
Wow.
And so it's like basically Demo most likely knew the woman who was living in the bedroom. She wasn't home. He went in there just like, hey, whatever. This is my neighbor. This is a community. Everyone knows each other. But Charles Flynn, the owner, really hadn't been there much. This was like a vacation type of residence for him. When he got home that day, he heard something upstairs, he and his wife. So Charles walked upstairs and opened the door, and there's Demo who's asleep on the bed.
Now let me stop you. Let me stop you because this is where people may have questions about. So this is this neighbor. Demetrius went over there because he knew the person living there. That person wasn't home, and then later on, after he fell asleep, the owner and his wife then showed up because they usually sometimes go there. It's like a vacation home. So he didn't realize the dynamics at that time, but he knew the person who lived there, and so maybe that's why he felt comfortable, is what you're surmising.
Yeah, and Demo literally walked around Mission Beach like he was he was like Einstein on the beach. He was described like that, but one guy once heard him playing a ukulele, shirtless, in a grocery store. Everyone knew him. So Demo just kind of was like the king of the beach. I think he was going over there. And listen, he was very popular with all races, definitely with members of the opposite sex. He was an extremely attractive, dynamic, intelligent, funny guy who was an ex-NFL player. He played for 4 years and was built like an Olympian. So, he was really popular, but he was also very noticeable. There were not a lot of brothers walking down Mission Beach and especially trying to play pro beach volleyball. And he was friends with the only other one who was also from Seattle, and his name was Lavelle Carter, and they bonded over it. And, I interviewed Lavelle, and he talks about kind of what also happens the rest of that day. And so Charles Flynn and Demo are in this bedroom.
Sure. And
Charles Flynn says, how did you get in here? What are you doing? And Demo was like, I just was watching the sunset. I go over there. And he said, hey, man, I can go out the same way I came in. And Charles says, okay, please do. And then he guides Demo. And he said Demetrius was extremely peaceful, calm, guides him out. And Demo steps over to the porch. And at this time, Charles doesn't realize that Demetrius is his neighbor. He just knows Randy, the white guy.
Oh.
He doesn't know Demo.
Got it.
And so he goes, hey, what are you doing? And Demetrius says, hey, man, chill out, bro. If you just call the cops, if you're going to call the cops. You just whatever, leave me alone, This is chill. And then I think Demetrius, since he was tired and exhausted, realizes, hey, oh my goodness, we might have a situation here. He tells Randy West They go downstairs. They walk onto the alley. It's called Queenstown is the alley. It's the name of it in Mission Boulevard. Charles Flynn decides to go through the yellow pages at the time. There's something called the yellow pages in 1999. It's a big, big book.
Sure. This is 99. Yeah.
That's right. So he's looking for the Mission Beach Police Department. He calls, he gets a dispatcher, describes exactly what just happened, and she then calls this in as a hot prowl, which is a class 1 felony. So, and that in turn, they call in a helicopter. So there's a bright light, a helicopter. And at this time, Demetrius and Randy and Charles all see each other, and Charles tells the dispatcher, "Hold on, this is a misunderstanding. This guy's my neighbor." And he ran, and he's like, "Oh, everything's fine." The police pull up at the exact same time. They were down the street at a 7-Eleven getting coffee and donuts. I mean, Charles says he can see the steam still on the dashboard when they pull up. He goes to tell one of the officers, "Hey, this is a misunderstanding." The police officer says, who am I here for? Basically, he just looks right at Demetrius and sits Demetrius and Randy on these steps right across from Charles Flynn's residence. And they immediately go to Demo. They go to Demetrius and they say, "Hey, what were you doing?" And he tells them what I just told you. And they said, "Have you ever been arrested before?" And he was very cooperative. And he said, why are you asking me that? What does it have to do with anything? He tells them he has, and then they immediately mace him. When they mace him, he sprints down the alley. Now, I'm telling you this because Randy West and Charles Flynn both have sworn that this is what happened.
Right. And I want to make sure people understand. The person who called police ends up telling you this story.
And says, listen, and he's trying to tell the police, this is a huge misunderstanding. I messed up pretty much calling the cops so fast, right?
Yes. His life, Charles Flynn's life, Randy West's life. Charles Flynn had to leave San Diego. He moved to London. He lives there today.
He got out of town.
But back at this time, Demetrius is sprinting down the alley, telling them, "I'm going to get the real cops." He told them, you guys are I'm going to get the real cops. Turns the corner onto Mission Boulevard and he stops. Okay, he stops. Maybe the mace is in his eyes. Maybe he can't see. Maybe he realizes it's stupid, it's futile to keep running. But the police, the 2 officers, turn the corner and begin beating him with nunchucks. And, I have the autopsy pics. You see Demo's wrist, and you can see down to the bone. And I don't know if that's a bullet graze. If that's a bullet graze, that means he has 13 bullet wounds somehow. But, it's most likely a nunchuck that split his wrist open like that. So at this point, there's Rita Yanker, who's just coming out of her shop on Mission Boulevard, and she sees what she describes as a ball of arms and legs. But it's really Demo getting beaten with the nunchucks. He gets the nunchucks out of the police officer's hands. He's walking away. He's putting the nunchucks on the ground. He does a little victory dance, puts him down. Rita says the first shot goes right into his back. And they have 6 shots in his back in the autopsy. And he has definitely at least 11 bullet wounds, but there are 13 different types of wounds. It is cold-blooded. Then other people see, and then we have interviewed them. They see then Demetrius on the ground, and they continue to shoot into his body as he's writhing onto the ground. And then they keep their weapons drawn on him as he bleeds out on the sidewalk of Mission Boulevard. People screaming to do CPR. And he's driven off, and, he's basically DOA at Scripps Hospital, July 24th, 1999.
Wow.
And, all over SportsCenter, all over the national news. And then the next day, JFK Jr.'s plane crashes. And, Demo's story is, forgotten on a national level.
Right.
On the Notre Dame level, the friends, our teammates that I talked to, the people that knew him were devastated, crushed, in disbelief. Others maybe didn't even want to think about it because they had seen, Demo struggle after his playing career and thought, well, maybe he wanted this. But, I've heard things like suicide by cop and these notions. And I asked the 2 people that were there, I asked the people that saw him in his last moments of his life, and they screamed, no, that is not the case. That is not what was happening.
chaotic and really a misunderstanding.
Yes.
Wow. I've got to ask you, is there video of this?
Well, there was a video. There's Sam's Liquors, and there's a liquor store across the street on Mission Boulevard. You know, you would think that the helicopter would have video, but people, there are witnesses also that say that they saw the police confiscate the video from across the street, the liquor store. We have tried to track down any video of this. There's no video as far as that goes, as far as like private recordings or police recordings. And I want to remind you, in 1999, I don't even think I had a cell phone yet. I don't know if Demo did either, because we just weren't like that.
Sure.
It's not that I'm anti-technology.
It's not even like how it is now, where
right.
everyone has a phone. It was very different back then.
There were no cell phone cameras.
Yeah.
No one was going around recording that. And there was no social media. So like his story got lost, and I think a lot of people didn't know how to feel about it. I read the story in disbelief, and the narrative at the time was, hey, this is a guy that struggled. Like, what happened to Demetrius DuBose? He struggled after his playing career. He had, drug problems. This wasn't Demetrius DuBose. This isn't some normal, Notre Dame guy, some All-American captain. But let me tell you this, Demetrius DuBose was a human being. And so many of our former players, so many All-Americans have similar struggles. They happen to be still alive and they're able to pull through. But I don't know what, you still, Joshua, look like you're in your 20s. But for me, my 20s after college and after not being a star college football player, but after playing, it was a precipitous and dark drop.
It's a transition.
You go
from being a star to a regular Joe trying to do a 9-to-5, trying to make ends meet.
By the way, it's appreciated. I'm 30, but I'll take the 20 anything any day. But no, you mentioned it. There's this. There can be a fall from grace, especially when you go to such a pristine and prestigious university like Notre Dame, which at the time when he went, was that early 90s?
Yes.
Yeah, so Demo got there the year after the '88 national championship. So he played with a lot of those stars from that era and looked up to them and emulated them. And all of us, owe a lot to those guys.
It is a shame to see how the narrative has shifted too. It goes from what exactly happened to, it must have been something with him. He must have been having a tough time.
Well, it's this, right? Let's face it, okay? It was a cover-up of what happened. And if you look historically at this, and if you look recently when our country was on fire, with stories that were the exact same stories as Demetrius DuBose. I mean,
you're talking about the George Floyds and the
and what do people say about George Floyd? They say he was a criminal. He got arrested, but George Floyd was a high school football star in Houston. George Floyd came from public housing. George Floyd had a very difficult upbringing as well, and was a great football player in high school. But he dropped a pass in the state championship, and it kind of unraveled him a little bit.
Oh wow!
So what I'm saying is we can be quick to judge and say, hey, this person's gotten in trouble. That person's this. That person's that. But at the same time, we all struggle as humans. As part of our deal. We all have our struggles that most people don't know about mine or hers or yours because, we're not Demetrius DuBose, who is this name. So, they realized right away, another witness heard him say, we have to play the media game now. As soon as they found out that this was an NFL player, they just executed on the sidewalk. That right away they started playing the media game, and it's a reconstruction of events. Hey, we thought he was on PCP. He was coming at us. The hair stood on the back of our neck. This dude had barely a beer in his system and had trace amounts of ecstasy. And I don't know, listen, you weren't around in the 90s, but ecstasy was everywhere all the time, especially on the beach and at parties. And
you even mentioned another. You said that he also was involved in I don't know if it was a felony, but he was arrested because he had something called ketamine that today is used widely by a lot of people.
That's right. And it's administered in clinics and with doctors and under the guide of therapists. And again, this just kind of popped on the scene in the 90s on the black market. People, maybe some veterinarians that are a little left of center, getting this out, and it's a tranquilizer for animals, and you take it, and it, it's supposed to expand consciousness and comfort. But if you're using it yourself and you never used it, you can become very sloppy and disoriented. You're actually hallucinating. So, that was the case on a couple of occasions with Demo when he was just trying to kind of feel okay. And one of these cases where he was arrested, and what the police were talking about on July 24th, what he was saying was, a situation where he was at a bar, and the manager kind of targeted him and said, hey, asked the bartender, is this guy harassing you? And she didn't really say yes or no, but the manager took it upon himself to tell Demetrius to leave. And Demo was mad, and as he should have been. And he left in a storm. And then the manager called the police, who happened to be parked on the side of the highway about a block from this, bar and grill. And they pulled Demo over, and he had ketamine. So that's why he was arrested.
Yeah.
Yes.
John, can I ask you about this documentary? What can people expect? Who did you talk to?
I mean, we talked to everyone. First of all, Jackie DuBose, Demo's mom. I mean, it took years to find her. And I found her through my college girlfriend, who was friends with a woman that grew up with Demetrius in Seattle. And the next thing you know, I'm talking to Jackie for 6-7 months, and we talked on the phone every week. We cried together and got to know each other. And, I really do consider Demetrius DuBose's family my second family. I love them. I was just in Seattle for his 54th birthday. They had a memorial on Sunday, and really it was getting to know the family, getting their blessing for all of this, saying, hey, look, I couldn't even go to his funeral at the time because I couldn't find a way to get to Seattle from Chicago. I was, 25 years old and trying to figure out my own life. And for many years, that was still kind of the thing. And so I interviewed all of his family, all of his high school teammates, his best friend from childhood, a guy named Kenny Mitchell. I got to become friends with his first cousin, Jerry Jordan.
Let's be honest. Let's be honest with our listeners and viewers. You actually talked to witnesses as well and people who were there, right?
I mean, Rita Yonker and I text each other almost every day. She's the woman that happened upon this situation and then witnessed somebody else's son get murdered. And, she was bearing her own weight. Her own son died tragically. He was 7 years old and died in a horrible, violent death in an unthinkable way. And I think the police and the attorneys for the city of San Diego at the time, they used that against her to say, hey, she over-identified with this person dying and wanted to be a kind of like a hero witness, and They tried to pick her apart. But her story stayed consistent and has from the jump, from the very beginning, from the night of July 24th to right now. And I asked her 100 different ways what she saw, and never once did she sway. And I have it all on film.
She never wavered.
Other people that were there, I interviewed. And, the only other witness on the street that they used who was of any credibility happened to be an off-duty San Francisco police officer.
Wow.
So you have that witness, and then you have Rita, who is just a woman trying to escape her own tragedy by moving to San Diego, sunny San Diego. And that's
John, you've got hours and hours worth of interviews. In fact, what people are going to see this weekend at DPAC on campus, and we'll have that date again before we end this. I want to show people a trailer, exactly what they're going to see, and then I have a question afterwards. Yeah.
I wish he was here with us, laughing and joking. I really love him, and I miss him. My cousin got killed by the San Diego police, and I just couldn't fathom in my mind that he would be gone.
So my question for you is, how did you, and your partner is also a part of this as well, and she helped with a lot of the visuals in this documentary. How are you guys able to know what to put in this documentary? And and also tell his story and the story of him at Notre Dame for people who don't know. How are you able to do that and process all that video?
Especially give your friend justice, right? It's hard when you're so close to it.
Well, this is the third version of the film, basically, that we're showing for the first time publicly, and it's a private event, so RSVP only, and I've sent it out to our teammates and friends. But again, I visited the family. I have their blessing. They're going to get a digital copy of this. It took 10 years for this to come out, and I think at one point we were making a film that was going to be like so many others. That was a social justice film, and it was focused only on July 24th. But Demo is way more complex and doesn't want to be just remembered for that tragedy. So I really think it's important for people to realize this film is a sweeping artistic ode to our brother. Mm-hmm. And just like he was complicated and not easily describable, this film is sweeping and beautiful. He was such a lover of music, and it made such an impact. And so many people say this in the interviews. Like literally every frame has music. Every second of this film has music in it. And it also is like, in many ways, I feel like Demo is the catcher in the rye. He's the guy like holding us all up, not letting us fall into adulthood. And here we are, back so many years later. But this thing that happens at Notre Dame when you go, it's like a portal to this place when everything was in front of us. When we had this limitless possibility of everything. And wow. What's beautiful is like Demo's story is the one that can bring us back together to that place where everything's still in front of us. Mm-hmm. And it's because his story, his physical body is gone, but he can never really die if his story never can die. And we can't either. Because we were all there. This could have been any one of the players that played with Demetrius. It wasn't me, and I was doing the same stuff as Demo, and I have to draw my own conclusions for that reason. And everyone else can do that, but what I want to really emphasize is like, this is an American story, right? This is a story of the Great Migration. This is a story about what it takes a village to raise sometimes, because his uncles and his aunts, his father wasn't in the picture. They stepped up. Other people stepped up. Notre Dame people stepped up. People at Bishop O'Day High School stepped up and made sure that Demetrius had what he needed in order to have this chance at stardom. And he took it, and it was a great American story. He achieved everything you could achieve. And like when his football was taken away, and really it was a choice on Demo too, to try something different, to like start exploring what this nagging feeling was inside of him, that there was something more. And he got a taste of that by traveling Europe for months. This guy traveled the world in the off season. He read book upon book upon book. I have his CDs that he was listening to. His mom gave to me. I have, his writings.
He was very cerebral, it sounds like.
And honestly, through this process, I know Demetrius more than I ever did while he was alive, because I've talked to so many people about him, and we have this other connection that's inexplicable, just kind of like the connection, like when you return to Notre Dame, that's hard to describe unless you were there. And then when you played, and it was really hard when we played. We smashed each other. There's a quote I found doing research about him from my local high school newspaper, the Northwest Indiana Times, where it says like Demetrius DuBose and I went head to head, like smashing each other like rams. And I watched this footage because I go through a lot of footage. There's a lot of footage in this film, like highlights, right? And man, the hits that we took, and then just like you stay in the game. One announcer even says, Demetrius DuBose, man, that will be bad. He's their best player if he's out for the game. But you see it, it's like a head-on collision, and they're starting to say, oh, his shoulder, though, is dinged up. But you see him, and he's back out there, and in practice even, we were back out there. And it's no one's fault. This is not like saying, hey, this is CTE. This is more complicated than that. I love football and I have no regrets. Those were the best moments of my life, but we can't be stuck in that either. We have to take that and figure out what to do with it.
Protect
and it's like right now,
You're
this
not
is
machines.
Yeah. You said it, Lauren. I think you perfectly said it, Lauren. It's like you're not machines, you're people.
You're human beings. Yeah. And you're trying to remember one of your close friends, your brothers, as you call him. I think this documentary is going to be really special. Again, how can people see it? You said it's a
April
private
12th.
event this weekend,
Yep,
right?
10 to 12. Is it April 12th, 10 to 12 at DPAC, right?
Yeah.
And people can only RSVP in order to get in. Do I have that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, we have 200
Okay.
seats. They're filling up. I know some of my teammates, if you're listening to this podcast, text me if you don't want to RSVP, if you don't know how to do the RSVP thing, I'll do it. But this is going to be the first half of the film. We're showing the first half. Okay. So we're showing, the film is sweeping and musical and beautiful, and they're intense interviews followed by lots of footage. And I want people to know it's a very visceral experience. It's emotional. It's also at times exciting and funny. But this is going to be the first half. We're going to end right when he gets drafted, basically, is when this first half is going to end. And the biggest reason we're not going to show the second half, number one, is this is Legacy Weekend. So this is a chance for all of our former teammates to get together. And at 11 a.m. is when the tailgate starts for the Blue Gold game. And I want people to get to that. So we're going to stop the film at around 11, and then I'll do a Q&A where I can answer questions that anyone has. But what's missing is this. How do we respond to this? Now, Oscar McBride and I were honored to be able to give a speech to get Demetrius DuBose into the Say Their Names gallery, which is a traveling gallery with people like Emmett Till and Harriet Tubman is in it, real people. And we had a chance to do that. And we filmed memorial that we did after that. And we could put that in the film, and we will, but this is also the chance to present this story to our other teammates and to Notre Dame, and to say, consider this story and consider together coming up with the right response for how we honor this man. And because every time I see the number 31, I think it's important for the guys that wear that number to know Demetrius DuBose's story. When they're in that linebacker room and they see the number 31 up there and it's Demo, do they even know his story? Wow. Because his story needs to be known. The people that are playing now, this is a story for the youth, the children. This is a story of hey, who are your parents, right? Because I don't know about you, but I'm assuming you're working like me, and that's 15, 16-hour days. Our kids don't get a chance to be with us because our responsibilities are so vast. Mm-hmm. So this movie is a window into who your parents are.
And that's I think that's a big part to this that I want people to know is this is bigger than just Notre Dame football. It's about a man's life who just so happened to play football at the University of Notre Dame. Yeah. And it is that reason that people will be transfixed by this documentary. And the trailer alone, I think it's a way to really engage people and to seeing this and wanting to learn more about Demetrius. You have been awesome. John, thank you. And please thanks Cecily as well for her part in this documentary. Again, it is April 12th, 10 to 12. It is going to be at DPAC. That is the DeBartolo Performing Arts Center. That is going to be showing there. And you have to RSVP. We'll have that link up on WNDU.com and wherever you get your podcast as well. John, thank you. Thank you for sharing the story, and thank you for taking the time to do this, because I think a lot of people are going to gain some renewed perspective about not just him.
Exactly. And remember the story and remember the man behind the story, right? Not just that tragic day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right on. Well,
thank you
both so much, Lauren and Joshua. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah. To hear him in his own words talk about his friend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Josh, we even know we were in the newsroom and we were talking about this story and who we were talking to today. And we've had people in this newsroom for 20, 30 years, and they say, DuBose, I remember him as a football player, but something bad, I can't remember what happened. So you remember the name, but you might not remember his whole life story and what exactly happened.
And I think this documentary is going to dip into that life story, and rightfully so, because he's done so much here for this community. And as his friend and so many others put it, he was a superstar here, and he was known and loved by a lot of the fans of the Fighting Irish. And so, again, that is going to be April 12, 2025, of course, just a few days from when we're recording this, from 10 to 12. We'll have the link up on our website. We appreciate you guys listening to Something Extra. We will see you guys soon.